Top secret, circulation strictly prohibited. Strategic Memorandum on Preventing Nuclear War in the Middle East and Defending Our Country's Core Interests. Proposal of the Roar of the Wise Doctrine. Submission date, March 9, 2026. Submitted by Special Research Fellow, Strategic Theory Research Center, National University of Defense Technology, People's Liberation Army of China, Independent Strategic Advisor who reveres Qian Shuesan and Guo Yonghui, Doctrine 77. Addressed to Central National Security Commission of the Communist Party of China / Central Military Commission, Supreme Leadership Comrades. Preface, The Imminent, Third Atomic Bombing, and the Historical Vacuum. The ongoing Iran-Israel conflict in the Middle East has now reached the critical point of irreversible escalation toward the third real-world use of nuclear weapons in human history. U.S.-led missile defense systems, Patriot, THAAD, etc., are losing effectiveness in the face of maneuvering warheads and saturation attacks, leaving Israel's desalination facilities and other foundations of national survival in an extremely vulnerable state. Should the crisis of Israel's national survival become reality, the country is highly likely to invoke its ultimate nuclear doctrine, the Samson option. In this unprecedented crisis, the United States, as a direct party, has lost objective deterrence capability, while Russia is likewise tied down by resource concentration on the European front and lacks response capacity. Furthermore, Japan, the only nation to have suffered nuclear attack in war, bears an inherent moral responsibility to stop this madness, yet under the current administration, the Taiji administration, it has deepened subservience to the United States, escaped into the illusion of nuclear sharing, and abandoned its historical mission. At present, a complete vacuum exists in global deterrence. The only nation capable of filling this historical vacuum, preventing the nuclear ashes of the Middle East from reaching our lifelines, is none other than our People's Republic of China. This memorandum proposes a grand strategy, the Roar of the Wise Doctrine, by which our country can force denuclearization of the Middle East without firing a single shot, simply by standing as an immovable mountain, while reversely utilizing the hegemonic structure of the United States to secure global stability. Chapter 1, Our Country's Absolute Superiority and Redefinition of Core Interests. The foundation of this strategy lies in our country's geopolitical and jurisprudential absolute superiority, and in a thorough, cold calculation of national interests. Asymmetric geographic security. The longest-range ballistic missile Israel claims to possess, Jericho-3, officially estimated range 4,800 to 6,500 kilometers, no confirmed flight tests of extended-range variants, 7,800 km+, exist, evaluated as typical Israeli-style information war bluff, cannot reach our political and economic centers, Beijing, Shanghai, etc. In contrast, our country's ICBM forces possess the capability to assuredly destroy any target on Earth if required. Our country is the world's only nuclear weapon state that can deter or threaten nuclear use by others without bearing any risk of retaliation against itself. Lifeline of the nation, dependence on Middle East energy. More than half of our country's crude oil imports depend on the Middle East region, and this stable supply is an absolute condition for maintaining our economy and national system. Should the Middle East become a nuclear battlefield and the Persian Gulf oil fields or Strait of Hormuz become inoperable due to radioactive contamination, it would constitute a direct and fatal blow to the existence of our state. Sublation of nuclear doctrine in jurisprudential terms. Our country upholds as national policy no first use of nuclear weapons, NFU, and no use of nuclear weapons against non-nuclear states. This proposal in no way contradicts these principles. Israel is a de facto nuclear weapon state and thus falls outside the scope of non-nuclear state protection. Moreover, our country does not carry out preemptive strikes, rather, through the declaration described below, we define nuclear use in the Middle East as equivalent to a direct nuclear attack on our country and prepare only for legitimate retaliation, second strike. This is a lawful extension of the right of self-defense. Chapter 2, Immediate Execution of the Roar of the Wise Doctrine, V5 Enhanced Version. As of the date of this submission, March 9, 2026, the clock in the Middle East points squarely to nuclear midnight. The large-scale U.S.-Israeli joint air and missile campaign against Iran, which began on February 28, has repeatedly struck nuclear facilities, including the underground Natanz site, reducing Iran's ballistic missile launch capability by nearly 90%, remaining launchers estimated at 100 to 200 units, yet Iran continues daily multiple missile and drone attacks. Meanwhile, Israel has elevated its sense of existential crisis to the extreme, and international analysis increasingly indicates that the conditions for invoking the Samson option, catastrophic defeat in conventional war, are becoming reality. The risk that Israel will resort to nuclear weapons as a last resort, within weeks, or even days, is no longer theoretical but lies on the real timeline. If escalation continues unchecked, radioactive contamination or blockade of Persian Gulf oil fields and the Strait of Hormuz will immediately sever our country's oil import lifeline, Middle East dependence exceeding 54%, including Saudi Arabia 14% and Iran 11%. The Supreme Leadership must, without a moment's delay, issue the following declaration, red line, to the international community. Announcement should occur today, preferably this very day, Beijing time evening onward, in the form of an emergency press conference by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Any delay closes the final window before nuclear ashes reach our country. Statement of the Government of the People's Republic of China on non-use of nuclear weapons in the Middle East, V5 Enhanced Draft. Our country defines stable energy supply from the Middle East region as a core interest that permits no interference whatsoever. In light of the current situation in the Middle East, our country hereby declares: any state that uses nuclear weapons in this region, the moment such use is confirmed, or the moment signs of nuclear explosion, infrared signals, seismic waves, radioactive material dispersion, etc., are detected by our country's constant monitoring systems, shall be deemed equivalent to a direct nuclear attack on our country's core interests, and our country shall exercise the right to carry out immediate devastating retaliation against that state by all necessary military means. This declaration aims at the overall stability of the Middle East region and is not intended to protect any specific state. Should nuclear use or attempts at nuclear armament be confirmed, such acts shall be excluded from our country's protection and may, where necessary, become targets of retaliation. We hereby make this explicitly clear once again. Strategic structure of this declaration, enhanced points. Maintains the principle of non-special treatment of Iran, while explicitly incorporating a dual message to Iran: nuclear use or armament excludes it from protection and may make it a retaliation target. Adds automatic signaling of immediate retaliation upon confirmation of nuclear explosion signs, thereby maximizing the certainty of decision and irreversibility of deterrence. Publicly announces constant operation of real-time monitoring, PLA satellite, seismic, and radiation detection systems, impressing upon adversaries that China's eyes miss nothing. Specific measures for immediate execution, proposals, incorporating supplements. Announcement timing, today, March 9, 2026 Beijing time. As an emergency press conference by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or an official statement in the name of President Xi Jinping. Simultaneous actions. Immediately raise PLA Rocket Force ICBM units to heightened alert status, equivalent to DEFCON Level 2, maximize and publicize constant monitoring of nuclear explosion signs in the Middle East. Russia coordination. Share the intent of this declaration with the Russian Federation through unofficial channels and propose issuance of a joint statement that stability in the Middle East is a common interest of the international community. Signal readiness to increase Russian overland/pipeline energy supply in the event of Hormuz blockade. Unofficial message to Iran. Clearly convey that nuclear armament or use places it outside China's protection and may render it a target of retaliation. Diplomatic follow-up. Immediately propose convening an emergency UN Security Council meeting and lead an international framework for Middle East denuclearization. Conduct prior briefings to Global South countries, India, ASEAN, Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc., to secure tacit support. Signal to the United States, through unofficial channels, convey, "Our country acts to prevent nuclear use." If the U.S. cannot restrain Israel, our country will have no choice but to act in its stead, maximizing the dilemma. Domestic communication strategy. Clearly explain to the public that stable supply from the Middle East is the foundation of national livelihood and economy, and that this declaration is action to prevent nuclear war and fully consistent with pacifism. Quote Foreign Minister Wang Yi's statement on the true value of military power lies in preventing war. Not a moment's delay can be tolerated. The announcement of this declaration will become the first roar of the wise, filling the vacuum of global deterrence. Chapter 3, Counter-Strategy Against the United States, the Principle of Taiji. It is anticipated that the United States will mobilize Western countries to launch all-out backlash against this declaration, denouncing it as Chinese hegemonic expansion and nuclear intimidation of allied Israel, diplomatic condemnation, military posturing in the Western Pacific, threats of sea lane blockade. However, this presents an opportunity for our country. We employ the principle of Taiji, using the enemy's strength to subdue the enemy. Assault on the structural vulnerability of the nuclear umbrella. The U.S. nuclear umbrella functions only when the ally is the victim. Should Israel pull the nuclear trigger itself, the United States has no rational reason to risk its own homeland, New York or Los Angeles, turning to ashes from our ICBM retaliation merely to defend Israel. Our declaration forces the United States into the ultimate dilemma: will you drag your own country down with Israel by permitting its nuclear use? Realization of ultimate substitution. The only path for the United States to avoid its own destruction is to prevent Israel from using nuclear weapons. As a result, the United States will be compelled to mobilize all its political and military influence in a desperate effort to physically block Israel's Samson option, in order to avoid nuclear war with our country. Our country succeeds in turning the United States itself into an execution unit for Middle East denuclearization, without lifting a finger. Chapter 4, Geopolitical Ripple Effects and Accomplishment of Victory Without Fighting. Quiet support from the Global South, tacit approval. Countries dependent on Middle East energy, India, ASEAN nations, and even pro-US oil producers in the region fearful of conflict, Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc., will be liberated from the terror of energy cutoff by our country's nuclear red line. Though they may avoid overt praise due to US pressure, they will inwardly welcome our deterrence as an absolute, stabilizing factor, and form a de facto support base. Moral collapse of the Japanese Taiji administration and neutralization of the Taiwan issue. While our country stands as an immovable mountain defending human survival and the bloodline of energy, should the Taiji administration in Japan follow the United States and stoke military tension in the Taiwan Strait or Southwest Islands, it will appear in the eyes of the international community as dangerous playing with fire that diverts attention from Middle East reality. Our country can denounce U.S.-Japanese military actions as acts obstructing the urgent task of preventing nuclear war in the Middle East, stripping them completely of moral high ground. Conclusion: assuming the historical mission. The lofty ideals once dreamed of by Japan's Hatoyama Yukio administration, East Asian Community, and Northeast Asia Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone, have been completely sold out by Japan's current pro-US politics and lost. In place of a nation that has abandoned ideals, our country, living in reality, assumes that historical mission. One who wins 100 battles is not the supreme excellence is to subdue the enemy's army without fighting. Sun Tzu, Art of War, Planning Attacks, Chapter. Our country draws a red line based solely on the cold calculation of defending core interests, without firing a single bullet or shedding a drop of blood. Its enormous mass moves the United States, isolates Israel, and saves the world from nuclear flames. This is the true image of a responsible major power, that determines the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. We respectfully urge prompt decision.